I made a video on this a while ago. Strange noises being heard by various government workers in Cuba and in China. They began to experience some kind of unexplained brain trauma. Many people said it was a simple conspiracy. Maybe it was hysteria. One person says they experience symptoms. Other people then grow concerned that maybe they are, and a mass hysteria sweeps the office where everyone now feels sick. But there was also a strange noise being reported. Some said it sounded like crickets. Others described it as the sound of a marble rolling across a funnel, gradually spinning up and getting faster and faster. Now we're learning. While we may not have a full-blown conspiracy on our hands, many people affected believe it was a hostile attack by foreign actors, using a directed energy weapon that leaves no trace. The crazy thing? According to documents released by 60 Minutes, the weapons exist. They've existed for a while. One man claims to have been a victim of such weapons. Weapons that can cause vomiting blood and Parkinson's. This is really crazy. The story from 60 Minutes, brain trauma suffered by U.S. diplomats abroad could be the work of a hostile foreign government. Since 2016, dozens of American officials have come home from Cuba and China with unexplained brain trauma. Evidence shows it may be the work of another government using a weapon that leaves no trace. In 2016 and 17, 25 Americans, including CIA agents who worked in the U.S. Embassy in Cuba, suffered serious brain injuries causing impaired vision and memory loss, among other persistent symptoms. Now we've learned that at least 15 American officials in China suffered unexplained brain trauma soon after. The FBI is now investigating whether these Americans were attacked by a mysterious weapon that leaves no trace. Over many months, we have been collecting evidence of what appears to be a hostile foreign government's plan to target Americans serving abroad and their families. Mark Lindsay said, "For me, it was November of 2017 when I started to feel lightheaded a lot. I was getting more headaches. My wife was getting headaches too." We can see that he's wearing these glasses. If you look to the right, you'll see this woman wearing glasses as well. Apparently, these are prescription glasses for light sensitivity from persistent symptoms. Whatever these people experienced persisted after the attack stopped. Maybe it was an attack, who knows? But more than one people experienced it. Mark Lindsay is a State Department security officer who worked in the U.S. consulate in Guangzhou, China. I hope I pronounced that right. He says that he and his wife began to suffer after hearing strange sounds in their apartment. Mark Lindsay, he said, picture holding a marble. Then picture if you had like a 6-foot in diameter funnel, metal funnel. The sound that marble would make as it goes around and it progressively gets faster as it goes down toward the hole at the end. It's a sound like I've never heard before. Pelly asks, was this subtle? Like, did I hear that? No. It was actually somewhat loud. I heard it about 3 or 4 times, always in the same spot, always over my son's crib, and always right before we would go to bed. Lindsay wears prescribed glasses because sensitivity to light is among his persistent symptoms. He says, the symptoms were progressively getting worse with me. My headaches were getting worse. The most concerning symptom for me was memory loss, especially short-term memory loss. Mark Lindsay believes he was targeted because of his work. He uses top-secret equipment to analyze electronic threats to diplomatic missions. When the story first emerged, a lot of people thought it was nothing, as I mentioned earlier. We've actually seen some anti-war journalists claim it's a conspiracy theory and no one was actually injured. But I have to wonder, if so many people are reporting trauma, concussion-like symptoms, and being prescribed glasses because of light sensitivity, maybe this isn't a conspiracy. As reported by 60 Minutes, the U.S. has known about this weapon, or actually had weapons like this, for a long time. I think like 1996. I could be wrong. They talk about it in the report. But one woman reported that her dogs were vomiting blood. One person reported that these weapons are capable of causing Parkinson's disease. Let's read on. His neighbor was Catherine Werner, who lived one floor up. She's a U.S. Commerce Department trade officer who promoted American business from the Guangzhou consulate. Catherine Werner said, I woke up in the middle of the night. I could feel this sound in my head. It was intense pressure on both of my temples. At the same time, I heard this low humming sound, and it was oscillating. I remember looking around for where the sound was coming from because it was painful. Scott Pelly asks, when did you first notice that you weren't feeling well? She goes on, October of 2017, I started to get hives all over my body, really bad hives. I woke up with headaches every day. I started to feel tired. The simplest things would just make me very, very tired. Pelly asks, were these symptoms growing worse over time? And she said, yes, they were. My symptoms would get so bad that I would throw up or I would wake up with nosebleeds. She says even her dogs were throwing up blood. Warner assumed her illness was connected to China's toxic smog. She didn't know it at the time, but her symptoms were the same that American officials in Havana had suffered since 2016. The U.S. embassy there is all but closed as a result. Someone in Cuba. Interesting. She says, we hadn't heard about what happened in Cuba. I mean, there were headlines in the news about hearing loss and attacks to our diplomats, but we didn't know the details. Warner became so ill, her mother traveled from the U.S. to live with her. She says she spent almost 3 months with me. During the time, she also got very ill, and she and I shared the same symptoms. Pelly asks, what sort of symptoms did your mother have? Warner replies, headaches and ringing in our ears. We also started to both have difficulty recalling words. There's the memory loss. After reporting her experiences, Warner was medically evacuated to the U.S. for treatment. U.S. agencies are investigating, but Mark Lindsay has a theory. Lindsay says this was a directed standoff attack against my apartment. Asked if it was a weapon, he said, of course it was a weapon. An energy weapon? Absolutely. What sort of energy is this that we're talking about? And Mark Lindsay says, I believe it's RF, radio frequency energy in the microwave range. A clue that supports that theory was revealed by the NSA in 2014. The NSA statement describes a weapon, such a weapon as a high-powered microwave system weapon that may have the ability to weaken, intimidate, or kill an enemy over time without leaving evidence. The statement goes on to say, this weapon is designed to bathe a target's living quarters in microwaves. The NSA disclosed this in a workers' compensation case filed by former NSA employee Mike Beck. Scott Pelly asked, when you look back across your career, is there any incident that leads you to believe that it could be that could be responsible for your Parkinson's disease? I will add, this is literally a conspiracy theory, but it's being supported by at least some evidence by the NSA. It's possible we have international conflict, and we have this employee saying, yes, he believes it may be an energy weapon. In the 1990s, Beck and an NSA coworker were on assignment overseas. Years later, he says they developed Parkinson's disease at the same time. In 1996, a colleague of mine, Chuck Gubit, and I traveled to a hostile country and worked there for about a week. And I can't say where the hostile country, the identity of it, because it's classified. It's not, but it was not Cuba or China. Pelly asked if he believed that he and Chuck were attacked with microwave weapon, and Beck said, yes, I had a pretty good working knowledge of the hostile country's intelligence services, what they do to people, what they have done, what their modus operandi is. Beck says more intelligence has come in recently, which he shared in a classified briefing with congressional investigators. Pelly asked, you can't discuss any of these details because they're all classified, but in your opinion, does the new information that you briefed the House and Senate Intelligence Committee staff on in any way relate to what happened in Cuba and China? He says it's relevant to the Cuba and China cases. No one has officially confirmed what Beck says happened to him is related to at least 40 Americans injured in China and Cuba. While Beck suffers from Parkinson's, the recent patients are being treated for the same kind of symptoms that doctors would expect from a concussion. Dr. Tina Shetty is Mark Lindsay's neurologist. She said Mark initially came in reporting symptoms of a headache, memory loss, sleep difficulties, emotionality, and irritability. She said she was very surprised he did not have any history of trauma or blow to the head, but he reported a constellation of neurological symptoms which are characteristic of mild traumatic brain injury without any history associated head trauma. Exactly how their brains were injured is the subject of a study at the University of Pennsylvania Center for Brain Injury and Repair. Dr. Shetty is not part of that study, but her patient, Mark Lindsay, is. The presumption is that something happened which caused a functional brain injury of widespread brain networks because he has symptoms to reflect a multitude of brain networks. What Dr. Shetty described mirrors the findings published so far by the University of Pennsylvania study. Robin Garfield said, they have said that our symptoms are exactly what they saw in Cuba and that we have the full suite of findings that they had there. Robin and Britta Garfield are among the 40 patients enrolled in the University of Pennsylvania study. Like Catherine Werner, Robin Garfield is a trade officer with the Commerce Department. He was posted with his wife and 2 young children in Shanghai. Did I maybe think that was a woman? That's a guy. Robin said, I don't know when the sound started. I do know that it was for months on end. Britta said, I was sitting next to Robin and I felt something like hit me from the left side. At first, it felt like an electric shock, and then it paralyzed me so I was not able to move or speak. Pelly said it hit you so hard you felt like you were in danger in the room. Yes. They say the children suffered blurred vision, and loss of balance. Pelly asked, your daughter was literally falling down, and Robin replied, yes, she fell down multiple times that day. Britta said, we went on a walk and she just fell on her face. It was very abnormal. She never does that. And then a second time, she completely lost her balance and just fell to the side. Last spring, the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, confirmed the case of Catherine Werner. UPenn found her brain injuries matched the Cuba victims. We have a letter here. I'm not going to go through everything because it goes on to a great deal, but I do want to read their conclusion. They say the State Department declined an interview, but in a statement to 60 Minutes said, we will continue to provide our colleagues as the care they need regardless of their diagnosis or the location of their medical evacuation. A State Department official told us that the Cuba patients are victims of an attack, but State hasn't made the same determination for the China patients. The department has asked the National Academies of Science to assist in the medical investigation. It would seem the State Department is saying it was an attack. It is. So conspiracy theory or not, I'm not entirely sure whether you want to trust 60 Minutes. It's interesting. But we have to recognize the development of new weapons. They're coming. We know they exist. It's not that hard to make these kind of energy weapons. We have the power and the technology. Americans are not the only ones who've been attacked. According to the Canadian government, 15 Canadians were injured in Cuba, including diplomats and their families. While for now, the FBI is investigating, it's being reported, at least by 60 Minutes, it was an attack. And it would seem that it's happened enough that there's a pattern occurring. Something is happening. Maybe it's a natural phenomenon. Who knows? Anyway, thanks for hanging out. If there's more on this, I'll definitely follow up in other videos. But I will see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. on this channel. And yeah, thanks for hanging out.